Now that we are 1 month away from Selection Sunday, I wanted to start doing weekly bracketology videos to analyze the updated projections week to week and predict how the bracket would play out based on those projections. But before we begin today's video, if you enjoy the content, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. And now, let's jump into it. And today we are once again looking at ESPN Bracketologist Joe Lunardi's updated bracketology. And to start, I want to look at who's the top overall seed, and he has Arizona right now as his top overall seed, but I have to assume that this is gonna change come the next update in his bracketology projections, with Arizona taking those back-to-back losses. Then his last team in, he has Missouri, and then TCU is his first team out. TCU getting a big win over another bubble team in Oklahoma State over the weekend, so we could see the Horned Frogs in the tournament come his next update as well. Then if we're looking at the bracket right now, Arizona and Michigan, two of his top 1 seeds, Wisconsin, St. Mary's, Arkansas, Louisville, Alabama all look like they're jumping up a spot, as well as Missouri. You have Tennessee dropping down a spot after their recent losses. NC State up another one. Purdue up another one to a 2 seed now. And then Harvard looks like a new addition to the bracket. Our other 1 seeds are UConn and Duke still. So we still have all the same 4 1 seeds since our last video. Vanderbilt's up. But then you see teams like Virginia, Iowa, Texas A&M that have taken recent losses. A&M might even drop more based on their recent play. North Carolina, he has down 2 spots. USC, Nebraska, and then we have Miami up a spot, and then UCF down a spot. But everyone else looks to have been staying pretty much the same. If we look at our current bubble picture, our last 4 buys are Georgia, UCF, UCLA, and Miami. Miami getting a big win, so that should move them up. And I believe Georgia and UCLA both took losses over the weekend. Then you have Texas, USC, San Diego State, and Missouri as his last 4 in. His first 4 out are TCU, Virginia Tech, Ohio State, and New Mexico. Then those next 4 out are California, Oklahoma State, VCU, and Seton Hall. Then if we look at the conferences, SEC still on top with 11. Then you have the Big Ten right behind them with 10. ACC at 8, Big 12 with 7, and then the West Coast and Big East both have 3, and the Mountain West are now at 2. But now we're going to throw Joe Lunardi's updated bracket into our own and make our predictions as to what would happen if the bracket were to end up like this right now. And we're going to start filling out our bracket out in the West region, as Arizona is Joe Lunardi's current number 1 overall seed, so that's where we'll begin. And their first round matchup, they're taking on App State, one of the better mid-major teams right now, but 1 versus 16 is kind of hard to go with the 16s based on history. So give me Arizona in that matchup. Then the 8-9 matchup with Wisconsin taking on SMU. Wisconsin has been on an absolute tear as of late. Nick Boyd, John Blackwell, 2 of the best guards, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country as it looks right now. I think they have one of the best backcourts, and what I always believe is guards win in March. So SMU has some good guards of their own with Boopy Miller. You got Jerome Pierre Jr. as well, but I really like the way the Badgers are playing right now, so I'm picking Wisconsin to move on in that matchup. Then we have Arkansas versus Stephen F. Austin. Arkansas, one of the most talented teams in the country. I truly believe that, and I say that in just about all of my videos because that's just how much I believe in them. I really like Coach Cal and what he's doing with the Razorbacks, one of the best teams in the SEC. Just beat Auburn over the weekend as well, so I'm going with Darius Acuff and the Razorbacks to move on to the second round. Then you have Gonzaga playing Portland State. We saw Gonzaga take that tough loss to Portland recently, so there is some hesitancy with me and the Zags right now, but I don't think Portland State has enough to get past them, so give me Gonzaga. Then we have the 6-11 matchup where you'll see Clemson taking on either San Diego State or Missouri. Honestly, the way this Clemson team is they can play with anybody, but they can also lose to anybody. So I do think this would be a really tough matchup between either of them. We also see a lot of times that one of the 11 seeds or one of those teams that are in those first 4 games actually moves on out of the round of 64 into the round of 32. So in this matchup is where I'm actually going to be picking the 11 seed. I like either San Diego State or Missouri, but if I had to pick in that game, I think it would be Missouri winning that one. So give me Missouri to beat San Diego State and then them to beat Clemson and make it into the second round. Well, they'll be taking on either Florida or Winthrop, and I have to go with the Gators right now. the Gators look like one of, if not the best teams in the country currently. Xavier Lee has been getting it going as of late. They've been playing Brown a lot more as well, which he's helped a lot. Clavzar has really helped the missing behind the arc from them. And they have one of the best front courts in the country with Alex Condon, Thomas Houck, Ruben Chenulu, who has been a double-double machine as of late. You got Micah Hanlogton off the bench. Really, all I think Florida needs now is Boogie Flan to get it going even more. He's been a little up and down still, but if they can get him going with the way Xavier Lee's playing and the rest of those guys are, I think Florida truly is a Final Four contender. Then move on to St. Louis versus Georgia. Georgia, one of the better offenses, but they have completely fallen off as of late. We had them in our top 25 earlier in the season, but really once we got into the thick of SEC play, the Bulldogs have not been able to keep up with the competition. They're taking on a St. Louis Billikens team, Josh Schertz's team, one of probably the best mid-major in the country right now, between them and the Zags, if you can consider Gonzaga a mid-major. I love what St. Louis does. They are great both on the offensive end and the defensive end. They can get you in so many different ways. A lot of different weapons on this roster. Obviously, Robbie Avila, who followed Josh Schertz from Indiana State to St. Louis, is on this Billiken squad as well. And I got to go with St. Louis. They're one of my favorite, I would say upset picks, but the way they played so far this season, I wouldn't even say that they're an upset now. It's just they're one of the best teams in the country, and I have to have them moving on here. Then you got Purdue versus Wright State. Purdue went through a 3-game losing skid, but seems to have found some rhythm as of late. They still have, in my opinion, the best point guard in the country on their team in Braden Smith. You also have a lot of seniority around him with Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren. You got experience with Oscar Clough as well. Gahari Harris has looked great. You also have CJ Cox is looking good as well. They just have a lot of weapons, and if they can get it going, we know they're one of the best offensive teams in the country. The biggest question is, can they win on the defensive side of things? But I don't think Wright State gives them too many troubles, so give me Purdue. Then moving on to the second round, Arizona versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin has proved time and time again it can beat anyone in the country. We've seen them go into Michigan and beat the Wolverines there, so I don't think this would be an easy game for Arizona by any means, but I'm still going to be picking Arizona to move on. I think the Wildcats just have too many bigs that Wisconsin's not going to be able to match up with. They do have Nolan Winter, but outside of that, I don't know who's going to guard Krivas, who's going to guard Koa Pete, Toby Owaka. They just have a lot of weapons on the interior. It's going to take another team that has a lot of weapons on the interior as well to beat them. So give me Arizona to move on. Then you got Arkansas versus Gonzaga. If you talked to me a couple of weeks ago, I would have had Gonzaga winning this. I truly thought Gonzaga was one of the better teams in the country, but once Braden Huff got injured, this Gonzaga team has looked really inconsistent to me, even with their wins piling up. It's just an easier conference, obviously, in the WCC, and then they took that unexpected Portland loss. So give me Arkansas. I just have a little more trust in John Calipari and the Razorbacks right now. Then our next one, San Diego State or Missouri. I had picked Missouri in that one, so they'll be taking on Florida. I think it's a no-brainer for me. Florida, as I mentioned, looks like one of the best teams in the country. I have a lot of faith in these Gators right now, so I'm taking Florida to move on. Then we have St. Louis versus Purdue. I really want to take St. Louis in this one, but I just feel like Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Wren back in the big dance. There's no way they're not making a Sweet 16, in my opinion. So give me the Boilermakers to move on to the Sweet 16. Then our first Sweet 16 matchup is where we see Tommy Lloyd and the Arizona Wildcats take on John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks. I think this would be an amazing game, but I'm still going to be picking Arizona. I think the bigs are a big issue. Arkansas has some good players in their front court in Trevin Brazil, and then you also have Malik Ewan, Pringle, all of those guys, but I just don't think that they have enough to stick with Arizona in that one. I love Darius Acuff. I truly think he is one of, if not the best point guards in the SEC right now, but I got to stick with Arizona with how they've been playing so far, even with the back-to-back losses. Then you got Florida versus Purdue. Give me the Gators over Purdue. I just love the way that Florida's playing, and I think they have one of the best front courts in the country, which is where they'll be going up against another one of the best front courts in the country in Arizona. And right now, if I'm picking between Florida and Arizona, I think Florida is one of the hottest teams in the country. I got to go with the Gators to make it to my Final Four. All right, moving on to the bottom part of this side of the bracket, we have the South region where we see the UConn Huskies as our #1 overall seed, and they'll be taking on either Bethune-Cookman or Tennessee State in this one. And again, 1-16 matchup. Don't think the Huskies have too many issues here. Give me Dan Hurley and UConn to move on to the second round. Then you see Iowa taking on Texas A&M, a really intriguing 8-9 matchup between the Big Ten and the SEC. Iowa right now, it looks like it's Bennett Sturts and everyone else. And Bennett Sturts obviously is one of the best players in the country, but he is lacking a lot of weapons around him. You got Alvaro Folgaris, you got a few other guys as well, but really it's just what Bennett Sturts can do and how far he can take this team. Taking on Texas A&M with first-year head coach Bucky McMillan. They have been one of the biggest stories in all of college basketball, Bucky Ball. We're in first in the SEC through the first half of games, but has slipped back as of late. So I'm still picking Ben McCollum and the Hawkeyes to move on to the second round to get over the Aggies. Then we got Virginia versus Liberty. Liberty is one of my sneaky upset picks that I've been eyeing so far this season. Love the way this team plays. Can shoot it from behind the arc, have one of the better offenses at the mid-major level. Taking on a Virginia team, though, that I have been higher on than most. I love what Ryan Odom has done with the Cavaliers so far this year, has really shifted them more into a little bit more of an offensive team, but still good on the defensive side of things as well. I think Tice Ritter is one of the better big men. You got Malik Thomas who can score, Chance Mallory, really good freshman guard as well. So I'm picking Ryan Odom and the Cavaliers to move on, but I think that would be a really close matchup. Texas Tech versus Hawaii. Tech coming off of a huge win on the road at the #1 team in the nation, Arizona. So no way I'm not picking the Red Raiders right now. That Christian Anderson, JT Toppin dynamic duo is one of the best in the country. I don't think Hawaii would have a chance in this one. Then we got the 6-11 matchup where we see BYU taking on Texas versus USC. Texas, one of the better draft prospects that I've been eyeing as of recently. Dalen Swain has been playing extremely well for them as of late, taking on a USC team that has Elijah Arenas back now, but with all of the injuries that this Trojans team has, I just cannot pick USC. So in that matchup, I'd be picking Texas over the Trojans. But then when it comes to BYU versus Texas, BYU suffered a scare versus Colorado at home this past weekend, but there was no Richie Saunders, so that is something I'm taking into account. I'm still high on the Cougars. I believe they have Final Four upside. When you have guys like AJ DeBanza, of course, Robert Wright, Richie Saunders, you can beat just about anyone on the offensive end. But it's really that defense, kind of similar to Purdue, but I still believe BYU has the chops to get past Sean Miller and the Texas Longhorns in this one, so give me BYU. Nebraska versus North Dakota State. I'm still high on Nebraska. They lost back-to-back games against really good teams, but now it looks like they're kind of getting back into the swing of things. Everyone's getting back healthy. I love what Fred Hoiberg has done with the Cornhuskers so far this season, and I think this is the year they win their first ever NCAA tournament at the University of Nebraska. So give me the Cornhuskers moving to the second round. Then we have Utah State taking on a Miami team that just went and upset NC State on the road. Jay Lucas in his first year with the Hurricanes has been phenomenal. Malik Renew looks like a completely new player, to be honest. He's been one of the best players in the ACC. You got really solid guards that have been there, and Trey Donaldson, who played for Michigan last year, and then a few intriguing freshmen that they have there, and Dante Allen as well. So, and Shelton Henderson, another freshman there for Miami. I think they have a lot of key pieces. Utah State, Mason Falslev has been one of the best players in the mid-major ranks, so I don't by any means think this would be a really easy game, but I'm still picking Miami to move on to beat the Aggies and move to the second round. Then we have Houston versus Merrimack. Houston, steady and true. There's just no way they're losing to Merrimack. I can't see a Kelvin Sampson team do that, so give me Houston moving on to the second round. Now, in our round of 32, starting us off, we got UConn versus Iowa. I would really love to see Bennett Sturts go up against this UConn team. I think it'd be really interesting, but UConn just has way too many weapons that the Iowa can't counter. Obviously, Iowa has them in the point guard position with Bennett Sturts, although Silas Demery Jr. has been playing phenomenal for the Huskies. I think UConn beats them in all 4 other positions on the floor. You got Braylon Mullins, you got Alex Caravan, solo ball when he's shooting well, as we saw recently for the Huskies. They are a one tough out, and then obviously Taurus Reed on the interior. So got UConn moving on to my Sweet 16. Virginia versus Texas Tech. I just don't see the Red Raiders losing to Virginia. Although Virginia has competed with really good teams so far this season, they did take a loss early in the year to Butler. I just don't see them being able to compete with a team like Texas Tech. And again, like I mentioned, JT Top and Christian Anderson, two guys that I do have on my big board for this year's NBA draft. I can't see them not make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament this year. So give me the Red Raiders moving to the Sweet 16 for a matchup against UConn. Then we have BYU versus Nebraska. I love the story of Nebraska so far this season, and there are a lot of teams in this 3 versus 6 matchup that I would be taking the Cornhuskers over. But AJ DeBanza is just one of those guys that I think he can will his team past the 3 seed into the Sweet 16. Leading the nation in scoring right now, just seems like he's automatic at getting to his spots. Really don't know who on Nebraska would be able to defend him. Then if you have someone that can somehow slow him down, you also have Richie Saunders and Robert Wright to think of. There's just so many weapons on this BYU team. I gotta pick BYU moving on to the Sweet 16. Then we got Miami versus Houston, and although I'd like to pick Miami and it'd be a cool story for Jay Lucas to make it to a Sweet 16 in his first year as a head coach with the Hurricanes, Kelvin Sampson's not losing that game. He's making it back to the Sweet 16. He's out for revenge. Then coming into the Sweet 16, we got UConn versus Texas Tech in our first matchup, and then BYU versus Houston in our second matchup. This UConn-Texas Tech matchup, really intriguing. Again, I love the Huskies. I think they deserve to be one of the top 4 teams in the country currently, but Texas Tech has just shown an ability to beat really good teams. They've obviously went on the road and beat Arizona, got a few other key wins as well this season, and their resume is really interesting to look at. So I just really like Grant McCaslin and what he has with this Texas Tech team. I think the JT Toppin versus Taurus Reed matchup would be really interesting. The Silas Demery versus Christian Anderson matchup would be interesting. You got Donovan Atwell, who's been shooting it lights out for the Red Raiders, so who shoots it better out of him and Braylon Mullins or solo ball? They got Lawan Watts, who stepped up in big moments as well. I'm picking the Red Raiders to move on in this matchup. Then we got BYU versus Houston. We saw this in the regular season, and it went to the Houston Cougars, and I think it once again does that. So give me Houston taking on Texas Tech in this matchup. And right here in this Elite 8 matchup to make it to the Final Four, rematch from the Big 12. We saw Texas Tech knock off Houston in the Big 12 play as well, but we also saw it the other way. I think Houston gets them again, and I got Kelvin Sampson making it back to the Final Four. Now jumping over to the other side of the bracket is where we're at with the Midwest region, where we see the Michigan Wolverines as the #1 overall seed in this one. And honestly, whenever the bracketology projections update once again, I think it's going to be Michigan as the top overall seed in the entire tournament. Only one loss, and it was a tough loss to a Wisconsin team, but Wisconsin has been surging as of late. I think the Wolverines have just looked like the most dominant team so far in all of college basketball, and so I do believe they're going to be the top overall seed, and I just don't see them losing to either NJIT or Morgan State in this matchup. So give me the Wolverines to move on to the round of 32. Then you have Villanova versus St. Mary's. Villanova, really good season. Nice to see them back in the tournament after what was a really tough past couple of years for the Wildcats. It's really nice to see them back here, and they're taking on a St. Mary's team, a Randy Bennett team that's really well coached. Paulius Morauskas, I said this in the last video, if you haven't seen, one of the best players in the entire mid-major ranks. Really love what he does for the Gales, and I think this would be a really good matchup, but I'm going to be picking St. Mary's actually to move on. I do think Villanova has some really good pieces, but I don't know if they have anybody that can match up with Paulius Morauskas, and I just love what Randy Bennett's team does. So give me St. Mary's moving on to the second round. Then we see Louisville taking on South Florida, and this Louisville team is hot right now. They went up and put over 100 points on NC State this past week, and then went on the road and beat a Baylor team on a neutral site, but it was in Fort Worth, Texas, so pretty close. Seemed more like a home game for the Baylor Bears. Michael Brown Jr., now that he's back from injury, and when he's in the lineup, this is a different Louisville Cardinals team, and right now, the way he's playing, dropped over 40 points in that game against NC State. He just looks unstoppable at times. So I don't see South Florida pulling off the upset. Give me Louisville to move to the second round. Well, they'll be taking on either Alabama or Cal Baptist, and I'm going to be picking Alabama in this one. I don't think Cal Baptist is able to keep up with a team that has a style of play like Alabama, where it's a run and gun, just high-octane offense, pushes the pace, and is one of the best offenses in the country. Now, I will say Alabama is a team, though, that could get upset in a game like this just due to the volatility that they have because of how fast they do play. They can get out of sorts, and it could be a team like Cal Baptist that is able to take advantage of that and get the win. But I just trust Nate Oates a little too much. I can't see him losing in the first round of this one. Then we take on Tennessee versus Miami of Ohio. Tennessee, I've been really up and down on this season. At first, you had Jacoby Gillespie, who looked like one of the better guards in the SEC, and he still does. Felix Okpara on the interior. And then Nate Ament, he was my big question mark to start the year because although if you just looked at his points per game, it was pretty impressive for a freshman. Very inefficient, but as of late, it seems like it's gotten better and better, although his last game was a little bit of an outlier. So I do think Nate Ament and the Tennessee Volunteers are trending in the right direction a bit. But then you have Miami, Ohio, who is the last undefeated team in the entire country. Peter Suter, Ian Elmer, and that crew has been awesome. They've played a lot of close games, though, but have been able to pull it out, whether it's in regulation or overtime. And I think it'd just be a great story to have Miami, Ohio to move on to the next one. So give me Miami, Ohio. I truly do think they could beat the Volunteers, but I think it would be in a close one. Then you have Michigan State versus ETSU. Michigan State is really up and down. When their offense is going, they're a really tough team to beat because we know what that Tom Izzo team brings on the defensive end. But then whenever their offense is struggling, that's whenever a team like ETSU can beat them. I'm still picking Sparty to move on, but that doesn't come without some hesitancy from me. Then next, you got NC State as the 7 seed taking on a UCLA team as the 10 seed. UCLA just got absolutely blitzed by Michigan, but honestly, you can't take much part into that because most teams do. Taking on the NC State team that got blitzed by Louisville, and then they also lost to Miami, so a bit of a tough go for Will Wade and the Wolfpack recently. I still like Will Wade and the Wolfpack in this matchup, but it doesn't come without some hesitancy. I think UCLA definitely has the pieces, but the Bruins definitely not as good as I expected them to be. This team has struggled so far in Big Ten play, and honestly, they struggled a bit in non-conference as well. So weird to see them at that 10 seed line. Would have expected to see them a little higher. But as of right now, I'm still picking NC State, although they have been struggling recently. Then you got Iowa State versus Harvard. Harvard, really good story out of the Ivy League. Be really impressive to see if they could beat Yale, as Yale has just dominated that league, and it seems like they're a lock for March Madness coming out of the Ivy League every year. But if Harvard can pull it off, it'd be really cool. Robert Hinton, really good sophomore guard out of the Crimson there, and one that you should watch, but they just don't have enough to beat this Iowa State team. Milan Momcilovic, best shooter in the country, I'm saying it now. Taman Lipsey, his offensive game has been better as well. You got Joshua Jefferson. I think Blake Buchanan was a really big transfer for them. Then some of their freshmen have been stepping up, in Bateman and Torrey as well. I think Iowa State just has a lot of weapons this year, and they usually do, but the biggest question will be, is this a year that they're going to choke it away like they have a couple of years in the past, or is TJ Altenberger going to get this team over the hump and make it even further in the NCAA tournament? And in this projection, I at least have them making it to the round of 32. So starting off our second round, we got Michigan versus St. Mary's. There's just no way I can have St. Mary's beating this Michigan team. Although Randy Bennett is the type of guy that could knock off Michigan, I just think they have been the most dominant team in the entire country to this date. Really, the only biggest issue I've seen was that Wisconsin loss, and then we saw them struggle in games earlier in the season, like that game against TCU, but as we've seen right now, TCU is one of the first teams out of the field, and I'm projecting that they'll be in once this is updated next week. So that doesn't give me as much hesitancy as they did go on the road and beat that TCU squad. So I have to be picking Michigan to beat St. Mary's in this one. Then we got Louisville versus Alabama. I really like LeBaron Philon. I think this would be a really good matchup between him and Michael Brown Jr. Then you got Ryan Comwell going up against Aiden Holloway. I just trust Louisville a little more right now with what I've been seeing as of late, which is surprising to say because they did go on that skid. But again, when Mikael Brown Jr. is in this lineup, they're a completely different team. So give me Louisville moving on. Then we have Miami, Ohio taking on Michigan State. I truly think Miami, Ohio could win this game. Michigan State is a team that on the defensive end, they're one of the best. But like I say time and time again, if you are not consistent on the offensive end, that's the type of team that I think can be upset in March. Now, you do have Jeremy Fears Jr., who's one of the better point guards in the Big Ten, and I do believe guards win in March. But the story coming out of Miami, Ohio this year has been too good to pass up on. I've watched a couple of their games, and they've been really impressive out of the mid-major ranks for me. So I'm trusting Miami, Ohio on this one. Give me them moving on to the Sweet 16. Then we got NC State taking on Iowa State in this matchup. I think Will Wade, this is where his run ends in his first season with the Wolfpack. So give me Iowa State moving on to the Sweet 16. Michigan versus Louisville. Again, I think this would be another great matchup. I think this is where Louisville run ends. And I think Pat Kelsey gets them to the Sweet 16, but not much further. Give me Michigan moving to the Elite Eight. Yaxel Lindenborg and co. Again, just look too dominant. And then this is also where Miami, Ohio's run comes to an end. I think Iowa State makes it, and we get our 1 versus 2 matchup in the Elite Eight for the Midwest region. So between Michigan and Iowa State, who wins to make it to the Final Four? I'm picking the Michigan Wolverines to get in and be my first 1 seed actually into my Final Four in this bracket projection. I think Yaxel Lindenborg, Morez Johnson Jr., Ade Mara, that team in that front court has been one of the best in the country. Then you have guys like Elliot Cadeau, Namari Burnett, Roddy Gale Jr. And the X factor for me, actually for Michigan, is that backup point guard, LJ Kaysen. He has come into a few games and just completely flipped the script for the Wolverines. Did that this past week against a Northwestern team where they were down by 15 points in the second half and then came back and ended up winning by double digits over Northwestern. I think LJ Kaysen could be really big for this Michigan Wolverines team this year in March Madness. So I got Michigan making it to the Final Four out of the Midwest region. And jumping down to our final region, we have the East region where we see Duke as our number 1 overall seed in this part of the bracket. And in their first matchup, they're taking on the 16 seed of Long Island. And once again, it's a 1 versus 16. Just can't be picking 16s right now based on history, but not only that, this Duke team has been extremely dominant in ACC play, also in non-conference play. Cameron Boozer, one of, if not the best players in the country. You got Isaiah Evans, who's been playing well as of late, Patrick Ngungba, and the rest of the team. Just an absolute star-studded team all around. John Shire has another team that has the ability to get back to the Final Four just like he did last year with Cooper Flagg, Con Knippel, and the rest of those guys. Then our next 8-9 matchup, we see Auburn taking on Indiana. Auburn got a big win when they beat Florida a few weeks ago, but since then have been struggling recently. Lost to Alabama and then lost this past weekend as well. Then you have an Indiana team that just is coming off of a loss to Illinois. So both of these teams still trying to find their footing in conference play. Auburn thought would be a little better, but in Stephen Pearl's first season, he's had some issues. Sahad Pettiford has been extremely inconsistent, which is really sad to see based on what we saw from him as a freshman last year for the Tigers. Then you got Indiana in DeVries' first season. Tucker DeVries has been really good, but Lamar Wilkerson has been amazing for this Hoosiers team. But if he doesn't score, this team cannot win. So I really just think this would be a really tough matchup to pick between the two, but I'm going to be picking Indiana to beat Auburn and move on to the second round to take on Duke. Then you got St. John's taking on Belmont. Belmont, another one of those teams that I have my eye on as a potential dark horse to be an upset pick in the first round. But St. John's, man, they have turned it on. They won against UConn at Madison Square Garden, and then they just continue to win. Had a really gritty win on the road at Providence this past weekend. If you saw that game, you saw all of the chaos that ensued during it, but I'm going to be picking Rick Pitino and the Johnnies to move on to the round of 32. Then we got Vanderbilt versus UNC Wilmington. Tyler Tanner looks like one of the best guards in the SEC. I love what he does for this Commodores team. Has really shot the ball well from deep also, which has been a big improvement from last season. You got Tyler Nickel as well, Devin McLaughlin, Duke Miles, probably what their most important person earlier on in the season. And then Tyler Tanner has really emerged as well. I don't think they can... they're going to struggle much with UNC Wilmington. Actually, I really like Mark Byington and what he has going on there in Vanderbilt. So give me Vanderbilt to move on to the next round. Then we have North Carolina versus Santa Clara. This is a really interesting matchup to me, specifically with the recent news that we got from Caleb Wilson, how he is going to be out indefinitely. In researching a little bit about the injury and hearing a bit from not necessarily to the team, but sources close to it, it seems like Caleb Wilson, the goal is to have him back for the ACC tournament to get a little bit of that rust off, and then go and have him good to go and fully back for the NCAA tournament. So in that scenario, I do think North Carolina would win this game, but I'm projecting the bracket as I am right now, which is what I'm doing. I'm actually picking the upset in Santa Clara. I think Santa Clara, out of the WCC, it's been one of the best teams in that conference and a really good mid-major. They have a lot of weapons around them on that roster. So give me Santa Clara in an upset over the Tar Heels. But again, if Caleb Wilson is back, I'm picking North Carolina to win this one. But give me Santa Clara. Then we have Kansas taking on Austin Peay. Kansas, this team is really interesting to me right now because for the longest time, it just seemed like if Darren Peterson played, they had a shot, and if Darren Peterson didn't play, they didn't. But then we saw Kansas beat Arizona at Allen Fieldhouse without Darren Peterson, which was absolutely incredible to watch. And then they had Darren Peterson on the road this past weekend at Iowa State, and it was one of his worst games of the season. I believe he only scored like 10 points, went 3 of 10 from the field. Melvin Council Jr. has been huge for this team, and I don't know if this is necessarily true, but some people are saying that there are scenarios where Kansas might be better without Darren Peterson. I don't think I subscribe to that because I do have Darren Peterson as my number one prospect for the NBA draft this year, and that's just really hard to say if the number one prospect doesn't make your team better. But I'm picking Kansas in this matchup over Austin Peay. I don't think there's many questions on that one, but this Kansas team, really interesting and something I'm watching closely as we get to the end of the season and to postseason play. Then we have Kentucky versus UCF. UCF was a really big story earlier in the season. Honestly, has exceeded my expectations as a whole. This Golden Knights squad has been a really good team out of the Big 12. Then you have a Kentucky team that really struggled earlier in the year, and then it seems like they're coming on as of late, but then lost to Florida this past weekend. Although I will say they put up a really good fight. It was on the road at Florida, and Kentucky did have a shot to win it. So I do think Kentucky wins this matchup. And for Mark Pope's sake, I do hope they win this matchup because don't really want that first round exit for the Wildcats. And then our last matchup of the first round out of the East region, we have Illinois taking on Navy. Illinois, I had them going to the Final Four in my last video. I think they're one of the better teams in the country and are playing like one of the better teams in the country. So I got to pick Keaton Wagler and Illinois to move on to the round of 32. First matchup in the second round of the East region, we have Duke taking on Indiana, and John Shire is making it back to a Sweet 16 with this Duke roster. If he doesn't, it's a massive blow up. There are some hesitancies that I have with Duke, mainly just the inexperience that we've seen, and it was one thing that I felt like was an issue last year. Although that Duke team was phenomenal, I don't think this Duke team is anywhere near how good the team was last year. The inexperience, not necessarily of just Cameron Boozer and the freshmen, but even their sophomores didn't necessarily play a ton last year. You had Isaiah Evans and Patrick Ngungba who played minutes off the bench, but they weren't huge contributors, and now these guys are in starring roles for the Blue Devils alongside Cameron Boozer, alongside freshman Dame Sarr, Caden Boozer, Hemenia. You have Caleb Foster, who at times was benched in backup last year. It just kind of seems like it's a bit all over the place for this Duke team. So I do think they would beat Indiana, although it would be a close game. But I'm not saying that they're just a shoo-in in that one either. Then we have St. John's taking on Vanderbilt. And earlier in the year, Vanderbilt got off to that really hot start, 16-0, and has been sliding a bit ever since. I believe they're 500 or around 500 since that 16-0 start. So St. John's on the other end, it seems like they're starting to peak at the right time. Really struggled a bit in the earlier season, which was not meeting that preseason expectations that we had at all. A lot of people had them top 5 in the country, but as of late have been looking like a top 15 team right now in all of college basketball. So I like what Rick Pitino has St. John's at right now. So I'm picking the Johnnies to move to the Sweet 16 where they'll face off Duke. Then we have Santa Clara taking on Kansas. And although Santa Clara upsetting North Carolina in this bracket and this one making it to the round of 32, I think that's where it stops. I'm picking Kansas to move to the Sweet 16 and get past Santa Clara. Then we got Kentucky taking on Illinois, and I don't see a world where Kentucky is beating Illinois in this scenario. Keaton Wagler has been one of the biggest breakouts in the entire college basketball scene this year. He had multiple 30-point games, and now they got Kylan Boswell back, and Kylan Boswell looked like he was ready to go in that game against Indiana over the weekend for Illinois. They have a really deep team, a really big physical team as well, and one of the better offenses in the country, so I got to be picking the Fighting Illini. I don't think Kentucky has enough weapons to keep up with them. Then we have Duke taking on St. John's. I am picking Duke in this one, but St. John's, with the way they played against UConn, they made it a slugfest, and if they do this against this Duke team, I think Duke has the physicality to match it, but I wouldn't be surprised if St. John's pulled it out, although I am going to be sticking with my gut and picking Duke in this one. And then Kansas and Illinois. I know it's a 2 versus a 3 seed, but I think Illinois would win this one and move on to the Elite Eight. So give me Duke versus Illinois in the Elite Eight for a chance to go to the Final Four. We've seen this matchup in recent years, and I think in this one, I'm picking Illinois to get back to the Final Four. I had them in my last video going. That's just how much I trust what this Illinois team is doing right now. So give me Illinois to advance to the Final Four. All right, so in our Final Four, we have Florida, Houston, Michigan, and Illinois. And in our first matchup of the Final Four, we have a rematch of last year's national title game in the Florida Gators taking on the Houston Cougars. And the biggest question is, do I think Houston gets revenge and beats Florida to make it back to the national title game with the chance to win the national championship? And honestly, I think this would be another great matchup like we had in last year's title game. I think Houston definitely has the edge on the guards department. You got Kingston Flemings, who has been a really big piece for Houston, one of the best players in the Big 12 and a really big NBA draft riser. You got Milos Uzan, who honestly is having a bit of a quiet season due to Kingston Fleming's breakout, but you also have Emmanuel Sharp, who just looks as consistent as ever. And then in the front court for the Cougars, you got Kristanak Jr. and JoJo Tugler. But then on the other side for Florida, they definitely have the better front court to me with Alex Condon, Ruben Chinlu, and Thomas Houck. But then in that backcourt, it's a little thin when you got Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan. And so, honestly, as a whole, I think I'd be picking Florida as long as the guards produce. If Houston can slow down those guards, though, and get them out of their rhythm, this is where I think Houston would be able to win this one. But I'm going to stick with my gut and pick the Florida Gators to once again knock off Houston and make it to the national championship just like they did last season. Then in our next matchup, this is where we see Michigan taking on Illinois. And this is honestly kind of a tale of two different types of play for me, where you got Michigan, you got the physical front court with Yaxo Lindenborg, Morez Johnson Jr., Ade Mara, and then their guards are slightly lacking. Elliot Cadeau has been great. LJ Kaysen has been good as well, but in terms of guards in this matchup, Illinois definitely has the better of the two with Kylan Boswell and Keaton Wagler. But Illinois is definitely physical at their own right. You got the Avicic brothers with Tomislav and Zvonimir. You got David Merkovich. They also have Johnny Davis, who can shoot it well from deep. Ben Hummerhouse, who can also shoot it well. So I think this is another really intriguing matchup. But with what I've seen from Michigan so far, although they are extremely volatile, which does gives me a bit of concern, just meaning that there are some games where they are dominant throughout the entire part, but there are other games where they're only dominant for a little bit. I still am picking the Wolverines because even when they're in a hole, it just seems like they can climb out of it so quickly. So I got Dusty May and the Michigan Wolverines making it to the championship game versus the Florida Gators. And this is a matchup I really want to see. If it's not in the championship game, I just hope we get it sometime in March Madness. just for the pure front court versus front court that it is. As I mentioned, both of these teams are probably my top 2 front courts in the entire country. I think the Ruben Chinulu versus Ade Morrow matchup would be really intriguing. I think the Morez Johnson Jr. versus Alex Condon matchup would be really intriguing. I really like this Thomas Houck and Yaxel Lindenborg matchup. That would be good. But when it comes to this game, I actually think Florida has the better guards from what I've seen. Xavier Lee has stepped up recently in a big way. I think Clavzar would be huge in this one because he gives them more of a threat from the perimeter, although Xavier Lee has been shooting better also. And I think these numbers for that 3-point percentage as a team total for Florida is starting to creep up, because one thing is we've never had a team win that doesn't shoot over 30% from the 3-point line. And Florida, I believe, has not hit that number yet, but they're slowly creeping up and getting close to that number, which I think they'll hit by the end of the season. So give me Florida to beat Michigan and win the national championship if this were the bracket and it started today. But that wraps it up for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this week's bracketology update and my predictions if the bracket were to happen like it is right now. Also, if you enjoyed the content, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching and all of the support, and I'll see you in the next one.